Cancer is supposed to be a modern disease, a price we pay for the world we built. Pollution, processed food, chemicals in the water, that is what most people believe causes cancer, a disease born from modern civilization. But what if cancer is older than civilization? Older than agriculture? Older than our entire species? In 2016, researchers in South Africa found something that rewrote the timeline. A malignant tumor inside a bone nearly 2 million years old. Not a benign growth, not a healed fracture. An aggressive osteosarcoma, the same cancer that kills people today. And the bone did not belong to a human. It belonged to something that came before us. Swartkrans is one of the most important fossil sites on Earth, sitting in the cradle of humankind, just northwest of Johannesburg. This network of caves has produced thousands of hominin fossils, spanning millions of years. In 2016, a team led by Edward Oates at the University of the Witwatersrand re-examined a collection of hominin bones from Swartkrans. They were not looking for disease. They were cataloging old fossils. But one bone stopped them cold. A single metatarsal, a small bone from the foot, showed an abnormal mass on its surface. When they ran micro-CT scans, the internal structure revealed something unmistakable. The growth had destroyed normal bone tissue and replaced it with chaotic new formations, radiating spicules of bone, disorganized osteoid matrix, the hallmarks of osteosarcoma. This was not a healed injury. This was cancer. Aggressive, malignant cancer. The team brought in oncologists and radiologists who confirmed the diagnosis. The results were published in the South African Journal of Science, and the bone was dated to approximately 1.7 million years ago. 1.7 million years before Homo sapiens even existed as a species. But that was not the only discovery. The same team found a second tumor nearby at Malapa, another cave system in the same region. They examined a lumbar vertebra belonging to Australopithecus sediba, and embedded in the bone was a growth that had no business being there, a benign neoplasm called an osteoma, a tumor of dense, compact bone. This vertebra was dated to 1.98 million years ago, even older than the first. Australopithecus sediba was not human. It was a pre-human ancestor, a small-brained bipedal primate that walked upright but could still climb trees. And nearly 2 million years before any human would exist, it had a tumor growing in its spine. 2 tumors, 2 species, both predating humanity by more than 1 million years. Now here is the part that surprised even the researchers who made the discovery. For years, a popular idea had circulated through both media and parts of the scientific community. The claim was simple: cancer is a modern disease created by industrial pollution, artificial chemicals, and diets our ancestors never ate. In 2010, researchers from the University of Manchester published a widely cited paper arguing that cancer was virtually absent in ancient remains. They examined hundreds of Egyptian mummies and found almost no evidence of malignant tumors. They surveyed ancient Greek and Egyptian medical texts and found few descriptions matching cancer. Their conclusion spread through global media within days. Cancer is man-made, a product of modernity. Ancient humans lived cancer-free. The story was easy to believe. It confirmed what many people already suspected. But the South African discoveries proved that story was built on incomplete evidence. Cancer did not appear 1.7 million years ago because of factories. There were no factories, no processed food, no synthetic chemicals of any kind. There was only a pre-human primate walking across the African savanna, and it had cancer. But the South African findings were just the beginning. Once researchers knew what to look for, they started finding cancer everywhere, and not just in bones millions of years old. In bones hundreds of millions of years old. In 2020, a team based at the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto examined a fossilized leg bone from a Centrosaurus, a horned dinosaur that lived in what is now Alberta, Canada. The bone had a massive growth that previous researchers had dismissed as a healed fracture. But when the Toronto team cut thin sections and examined them under a microscope, they found the same chaotic bone growth, the same disorganized matrix, osteosarcoma. The results were published in the Lancet Oncology, one of the most prestigious medical journals in the world. The Centrosaurus lived approximately 76 million years ago, 76 million years before any human ancestor would walk upright. This animal developed the exact same cancer that afflicts humans today. Same disease, same cellular chaos, separated by 76 million years of evolution. But the story extends beyond bones. For centuries, researchers have examined the preserved remains of ancient Egyptians looking for signs of disease. And in 2009, Portuguese and Egyptian researchers CT scanned over 200 mummies. Among them, they identified cases of bladder cancer, breast cancer, and colorectal malignancies. Not modern Egyptians, ancient ones, people who lived more than 2,000 years ago. One case stood out. A mummy from the Ptolemaic period showed clear evidence of metastatic cancer that had spread from the pelvis into the surrounding bone. This was a person who lived during the reign of the Ptolemaic pharaohs, who ate a diet of grain and fish, who had never encountered a synthetic chemical, and who still developed cancer that killed them exactly the way it kills people today. And the evidence kept mounting. In medieval European populations, researchers at Cambridge found cancer rates far higher than anyone expected. A 2021 study examined remains from 6 medieval cemeteries and found that roughly 9 to 14% of medieval Britons likely had cancer at death. 9 to 14%. In a population with no industrial pollution and no processed food. Previous estimates based only on visible bone lesions had put the rate at less than 1%, but CT scanning revealed tumors hidden deep inside bones that external inspection had missed entirely. The cancer had been there all along. Researchers just had not been able to see it, and the discoveries were not limited to Europe and Africa. In the Americas, researchers found cancer in populations that had no contact with the old world. Pre-Columbian burial sites in Peru and the American Southwest yielded skeletal remains showing clear signs of nasopharyngeal and bone cancers. These were people living in environments untouched by European agriculture or industry, eating traditional diets, breathing clean air. Some of these individuals showed cancer in multiple bones, suggesting advanced metastatic disease. In Mesoamerica, pre-Columbian ceramic figurines depict individuals with visible tumor masses. The Inca practiced trepanation, drilling holes in the skull, sometimes near visible bone tumors, suggesting they recognized growths and attempted surgical intervention thousands of years ago. The skulls show bone regrowth around the surgical site, meaning the patients survived the procedure. Across every continent and in every population studied, the same pattern emerged. No human population was immune. Cancer appeared wherever humans lived and left recoverable remains. And they still got cancer. Because cancer was never about what we eat or breathe. Cancer is about DNA. And DNA has been making mistakes since the first cells divided. Every time a cell copies itself, it duplicates 3 billion base pairs of genetic code, and every copy introduces errors, mutations. Most are harmless. Some are repaired instantly, but occasionally a mutation hits the wrong gene, and a cell begins to grow without stopping. This is not a failure of modern living. It is a fundamental property of biology. Any organism complex enough to have cells that divide carries the risk of cancer, and that includes organisms far older and far simpler than any primate. Even Hydra, a freshwater organism with no brain and no blood, can develop tumor-like growths. Cancer exists wherever cells divide, and cells have divided for billions of years. The genes that control cell growth are among the oldest in the genetic code. A gene called TP53, known as the guardian of the genome, is found in virtually every animal with a backbone. Its job is to detect DNA damage and either repair it or kill the damaged cell. When TP53 fails, cells grow out of control. And that single gene failure causes over half of all human cancers. Elephants carry 20 copies of this gene. Humans carry just one. This is called Peto's paradox. Larger animals have more cells, which means more opportunities for cancer. But elephants get cancer less often. Evolution gave them 20 extra copies of the repair gene. Researchers have documented tumor, like growths in coral, among the simplest multicellular animals. Green sea turtles worldwide suffer from fibrocapillomatosis, a tumor disease linked to a herpes virus. Even Tasmanian devils face extinction from a transmissible facial cancer that spreads through biting. The cancer cells themselves are the contagion passing from animal to animal like a living parasite. The deeper researchers look, the more they find that cancer suppression genes are among the oldest in existence. Even plants develop tumors. Crown gall disease causes uncontrolled cell growth in trees, driven by a bacterium that inserts its own DNA into plant cells and hijacks their growth machinery. The principle is identical. Corrupted genetic instructions. Uncontrolled division. It has happened for eons. But here is where the story takes a turn that complicates the narrative. Because saying cancer is ancient does not mean modern life is innocent. The truth is more complicated. The Manchester study that declared cancer a modern disease was wrong about the conclusion, but it was not entirely wrong about the data. Cancer rates today genuinely are higher than in the ancient past. The question is, why? And the answer has almost nothing to do with pollution. The single biggest risk factor for cancer is age. The longer you live, the more times your cells divide. Consider what life expectancy actually means. In ancient populations, average lifespan was around 35, but that number is heavily skewed by infant and childhood mortality. Adults who survived to 20 often lived into their 50s and 60s, old enough for cancer to develop, old enough to die from it. But they were a small fraction of the total population. Most never reached that age. Today, nearly 80% of people in developed nations survive past 65. That means billions more people are now living long enough to enter the age range where cancer risk climbs exponentially. The global population has grown from 1 billion in 1800 to over 8 billion today. More people living longer. That alone explains much of the rise in cancer. Not pollution, not processed food, time. Every year, a person lives beyond 50. Their accumulated mutation burden grows. By age 70, the average human cell carries over 40,000 mutations. Most are harmless. But the more rolls of the dice, the more likely one will land on a cancer-driving gene. Cancer is not random bad luck. It is a statistical certainty if you live long enough. The math is relentless. And the more mutations accumulate, most ancient humans never lived long enough to reach the age when cancer becomes common. Average life expectancy in prehistoric populations was around 35 years. Cancer peaks after 50. So when researchers searched ancient remains and found little cancer, they were partly seeing a statistical illusion. The people had died of infection, injury, and starvation long before cancer could develop. It was not that ancient life prevented cancer. Ancient life simply killed people before cancer could. But that is only part of the story. Because some modern factors do increase cancer risk. Genuinely. Tobacco use, certain industrial chemicals, prolonged UV exposure without protection, obesity, which changes hormone levels and increases chronic inflammation. These are real risk factors supported by decades of epidemiological data. Cancer is ancient, but modern life has amplified it. The disease was always there. We just gave it more time and more triggers to work with. The Swartkrans hominin and a modern cancer patient share the same fundamental biology, the same mutated cells, the same uncontrolled growth, the same destruction of healthy tissue. The only difference is that one of them lived long enough for us to find it inside a fossil. But the deeper researchers dig into ancient cancer, the more unsettling the picture becomes, because the question is no longer whether ancient life had cancer. The question is how much cancer we have been missing. And the answer might be enormous. The biggest challenge in ancient cancer research is preservation. Soft tissue cancers, lung, liver, stomach, pancreas, leave no trace in the skeleton. They grow in organs that decompose within years of death. Only cancers that reach the bone leave fossil evidence. And most cancers never reach the bone. Estimates suggest that only 3 to 5% of all cancers leave any trace on the skeleton, which means that for every ancient cancer case, researchers find there may have been 20 to 30 cases that left no evidence at all. The fossil record is not a census. It is a keyhole. We see only a fraction of what existed. The Cambridge medieval study proved this when CT scanning revealed cancer rates 10 times higher than visual bone inspection alone had suggested. Hidden tumors inside bones that looked perfectly normal on the outside, which raises an uncomfortable question. How much ancient cancer has been sitting in museum drawers undetected for over a century? Museums around the world hold millions of skeletal specimens. Most were collected in the 19th and early 20th centuries, cataloged by hand, examined only with the naked eye, and then placed into storage. No one looked inside them. No one had the technology to do so. Now they do. And a new field called paleoncology is systematically scanning those collections. And every year they find more cases. In 2019, researchers identified a benign tumor in a Neanderthal rib bone from Krapina, Croatia, dated to over 120,000 years ago. A fibrous dysplasia, a condition where normal bone is replaced by fibrous tissue and immature bone. A Neanderthal with a bone tumor, living in Ice Age Europe with no medicine and no explanation for the pain. In 2018, a team studying ancient Egyptian remains found evidence of breast cancer in a woman who lived over 4,000 years ago during the Old Kingdom period. Destructive bone lesions in the ribs and vertebrae consistent with metastatic breast carcinoma. A woman who lived and died in a world of stone temples and hand-ground grain, and whose cancer was biologically identical to the one that affects millions of women today. In Egypt, the cancer evidence extends far beyond a single mummy. A systematic review identified more than a dozen confirmed malignancies, spanning 3,000 years, from the Old Kingdom to the Roman period. Bone cancers, soft tissue tumors, and metastatic disease. One case from the Dakhla Oasis involved a young man with a rectal carcinoma, preserved so well that researchers could identify the tumor type from the mummified tissue itself, not from bone lesions, from the actual preserved cancer cells still visible after 2,000 years. And in 2014, researchers found the oldest metastatic cancer in a complete human skeleton. A skeleton from Amara West in Sudan, dated to around 1200 BCE, was riddled with lesions. The cancer had spread from an unknown primary tumor throughout the entire skeleton. Scanning electron microscopy revealed the characteristic destructive pattern of metastatic carcinoma. A person living 3,000 years ago in ancient Nubia, with cancer spread through their entire body. They lived beside the Nile and ate fresh fish and grain and worked the land. And none of that mattered. The disease was in the code, and it always had been. The timeline of cancer now stretches back not thousands of years, but billions, because the molecular machinery that causes cancer is as old as multicellular life itself. Oncogenes, the genes that drive cancer when mutated, are found in every complex organism on Earth. Ras, TP53. These genes existed in organisms that lived hundreds of millions of years ago. Fruit flies carry versions of the same cancer genes that cause tumors in humans. Zebrafish develop leukemia. Sea turtles develop fibropapillomatosis. Even clams get cancer. A transmissible leukemia has been spreading through bivalve populations in the ocean. The cancer passes between individual clams through seawater infecting entire colonies. This is not a human disease. This is not a mammalian disease. This is a feature of multicellular life. Any organism built from dividing cells carries the blueprint for cancer. So what does this mean for how we fight cancer today? If the disease has been embedded in biology for billions of years, this conversation between paleontology and oncology is still in its early stages, but the implications are enormous. If cancer is a reversion to ancient single-cell behavior, then the key to controlling it might lie in understanding what keeps cells cooperative in the first place. What molecular agreements hold a body together? And what happens when those agreements break down? Computational biologists are now modeling cancer as an evolutionary ecosystem, predicting how tumor populations evolve under treatment pressure the same way ecologists model species in a forest. Instead of maximum dosage designed to kill every tumor cell, they are testing minimum effective doses that keep the tumor stable without triggering resistance evolution. Early clinical trials in prostate cancer have shown that adaptive therapy can extend progression-free survival while using less medication and causing fewer side effects by working with evolution instead of against it. Does that change how we approach treatment? Some researchers believe it should. Fundamentally, a growing field called evolutionary oncology argues that understanding cancer's deep evolutionary roots could transform how we treat it. The idea is this: cancer cells are not alien invaders. They are our own cells reverting to an ancient program, a program that predates cooperation between cells, a return to selfish, uncontrolled replication. Cancer is evolution running in reverse. Cells abandoning the rules of the body and acting like independent organisms. Single-celled organisms competed with each other for billions of years before multicellularity evolved. When cells first began cooperating to form bodies, they had to suppress that ancient competitive drive. Cancer happens when that suppression fails, when a cell remembers how to be selfish. And if that is true, then brute force treatments that try to destroy every cancer cell might be missing the point. Some oncologists now argue for adaptive therapy, not trying to kill every cancer cell, but managing the tumor population the way ecologists manage invasive species, keeping cancer in check rather than triggering the evolutionary arms race that makes it resistant to treatment. Because when chemotherapy kills 99% of tumor cells, the surviving 1% are the ones best adapted to resist the drug. They multiply, and the cancer comes back stronger. This is natural selection happening inside the human body. Evolution does not care about the patient. Understanding cancer as an ancient evolutionary force has also driven research into immunotherapy, treatments that work by reawakening the body's own immune system to recognize cancer cells as threats. Because the immune system has been fighting abnormal cell growth for hundreds of millions of years, the tools to fight cancer may already exist inside us, written into the same ancient code that created the disease. Nearly 2 million years ago, a small primate walked across the South African landscape. It did not know what was growing inside its foot. It had no word for disease, no concept of cells, but inside that small foot bone, cells were dividing without restraint. The same process that would one day fill hospitals was already at work in our ancestors' bone. 76 million years before that, a dinosaur limped through a Cretaceous floodplain with the same type of tumor growing in its leg. Two organisms separated by 74 million years, different in every way imaginable, except one. They both carried the same flaw in the code of life. And so do we. Cancer is not a bug in the system. It is the system. The price every complex organism pays for the miracle of growth. The cells that build our bodies, heal our wounds, and grow our children carry within them the ancient capacity to grow without limit. We will likely never eliminate cancer. To do that, we would have to rewrite the rules of life itself. But understanding that cancer is ancient, that it predates our species by eons, may be the key to finally managing it, not as an enemy to defeat, but as a force of nature to understand. Nearly 2 million years ago, cancer was already here, waiting inside the bones of our ancestors, before fire, before language, before art, or music, or agriculture. If you want to understand where cancer really came from, the answer is not in the modern world. It is in the bones. If this changed how you think about disease, subscribe. We cover the DNA evidence that rewrites history. And if you think cancer is the only ancient disease hiding in fossils, the next video might surprise you. Around the world tonight, researchers are working on treatments for a disease that our ancestors could not even name. CRISPR gene editing, personalized immunotherapy, evolutionary treatment protocols, all informed by the understanding that cancer is not new. It is as old as complex life itself. 2 million years ago, a bone held the oldest evidence of a disease that still haunts us today. But that bone also holds a message. Cancer is not something we created. It is something we inherited. And understanding that inheritance may be the key to controlling it. What other diseases are hiding in the deep past, waiting for someone to look inside the bones? The evidence is there, inside the archives, inside the caves, inside the bones. We have not yet examined. Sources and study links in the description below.